You are listening to the Jam Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is award winning director Amber Sealey. Welcome back to the show, Amber.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
It's good to have you back. As I was saying, you were one of my early guests early on, and we talked about your movie at that time, No Light, No Land, Anywhere. Which
Yeah, a
was
few years ago. Yeah.
a really good movie at that time, too. We're going to be talking today about No Man of God, your brand new film about Ted Bundy, and it's fascinating. This I can't wait to delve into this movie with you because there's so much to it. It was so layered and so well done. Talk about how you first of all so our listeners know what this film's about. Why don't you give a synopsis of what No Man of God is about?
Yeah, sure. So it's based on actual transcripts, recorded conversations between a man named Bill Hagmaier, who was one of the very first FBI profilers of serial killers, and then Ted Bundy, obviously the notorious serial killer. And over about 5 or 6 years, the two of them kind of forged a friendship of sorts. And Bill went and he spoke with Ted a lot, and they grew quite close in sort of a weird way that you can, right, in that sort of situation. And Ted ended up really entrusting Bill with all of the secrets of his crimes. And so Bill was the person who got him to actually open up and confess. Obviously, he had been caught and convicted on a few of the crimes, but there were, thought to be somewhere even around 100 other women that he could potentially have murdered. And so, so he came clean about a lot of his crimes with Bill Hagmaier. And Bill Hagmaier went on to become just one of the most prolific, is that the word you use for a FBI agent? Uh, uh, People who worked with a lot of serial killers over the years, and he's now retired and lives in Virginia. So the film takes place over this 5-year period when they first meet, and then to the end of Bundy's life, and it looks at kind of the impact that not only Bundy is having on, socially, the kind of collective world around him, but also more specifically on Bill himself, and how it kind of weighs heavy on Bill's psyche, both forging a friendship with him and just working with him, and how it changes his perspective internally on just kind of interacting with the world. I mean, once you've sat and talked to a man who stalks women, it's going to change your own perspective the next time you see a woman walking down the street, right? You're thinking, oh, wow, am I a threat to her, or what, so yeah, it's kind of about a lot of things, really. There's other layers as well. There's the layer of the victims and the women in the room. How do they feel sitting so close to Bundy and having to listen to him speak about his crimes, and the impact that it has on kind of the little person, I guess, for lack of a better word.
This movie, it's so intimate, and because it's just their conversations mostly. I mean, it's Elijah Wood who plays Bill Hagmaier, and Luke Kirby. I have not seen him in anything. I know he's been in a lot of things, and he's Emmy Award-winning actor. Now I'm going to go search for him. I'm going to go watch some of the things he's in because he was so brilliant in this role.
Great. They're both so great. I mean, Elijah, we all know Elijah, right? Know and love him, but he is so phenomenal in this role, and just, he did stuff that I'd never seen him do before as Bill, and he's just brilliant. And Luke is someone I'd been a fan of for a long time. I really wanted him for this role, but yeah, people probably know him. He plays Lenny Bruce on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and he's a real talent. So hopefully this will, get him on more people's radars.
Well, he's certainly on my radar now, for sure. And you're right, Elijah Wood's role, I mean, obviously Luke's role is, got lots of meat and lots of things you can delve into, which makes it such a fascinating character, because Ted Bundy obviously was a very fascinating man. Bill role, or in Elijah playing him, is the foil on the other side, and that's much more difficult to play because it doesn't have as much meat to it, or depth. Oh well, I shouldn't say depth, it certainly has the depth, but he really,
he's not the psychopath.
Right, he shows the depth of how this relationship has affected them. Now, to watch two men in a room talking
Mhm.
for what, an hour and 40 minutes or whatever, could
Well, they
be.
would sit down for 2 to 3 hours oftentimes, and yeah, they talked a lot, and they wrote letters, tons and tons of letters back and forth to each other.
Well, I'm just talking about watching it as a movie. I mean, you
Oh,
would
right. Okay.
is watching two men sit in a room talking, you would think, oh my God, is this going to be a snooze fest, right? Anything but, because I was sitting at the edge of my seat actually throughout this. I mean, not throughout it, but during this film, and how the lighting, the staging. There's that scene with the woman just standing there, the production assistant just standing there, and the way you shot that was just so brilliant, and just and her and her, she as an actress,
Yeah,
because
she
that's
was she
difficult.
was
No,
she
no
was
words.
wonderful. Yeah. And she Hannah was her name was Hannah. I'm blanking on her last name. She was a background actor. And she just did amazing. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was part of what I loved so much about this film, about this script, when I came on, was that it really is a kind of dueling of these two very fierce minds. They're both performing for each other, right? They both want something from each other, and they're pretending like they're casual and this is just a conversation. But Bundy wants Bill to extend, to stay his execution, to extend his life. And Bill wants Bundy to come clean about his crimes and open up about what he did and be honest about what's going on, upstairs. And so they both want something from each other, and they go through a lot of sort of mental sword play. And that's part of what I love so much about the script. And like I said, these are lifted. I mean, a lot of it is verbatim stuff that they said to each other. We have hours and hours of recordings of these two guys kind of mentally dueling. And it's just fascinating because while they're obviously at cross purposes, they're also both really opening up to each other and talking about very intimate, very real things, because Bill kind of has no choice but to open up to Ted in order to get Ted to open up. Like when you're playing that role of the profiler, there are a lot of different tactics, certainly. And I think part of Bill's natural charm is just his affability and his openness and his sincerity. And so he uses that, to help soften up Ted, and it worked. I mean, Ted did not get along with any other FBI agent like he did with Bill, and in fact, he tried to leave all of his belongings to Bill when he was being executed. He wanted to leave everything to Bill, and Bill refused and said he didn't want it. But yeah, so they were using all their tricks and things to try to trick the other person and get them to say something that they didn't want to say or whatever. And so it's an interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. You'd think like two men sitting in a room, boring, but it's not. And we really, I'm glad you noticed all that with the lighting and the camera work and stuff, because we worked really hard to have visual expressions of what was going on in their relationship, and to have that room be really dynamic and not just, a boring interrogation room, but really find creative ways to use the production design and to use the lighting to make it stand apart visually, and to have the scenes be really differentiated from each other.
And you succeeded brilliantly in doing that. You really did. Why were you attracted to this? And also, you believed a woman should be directing this, and I want to hear that too. So first, why were you attracted to it? And second, why did you believe a woman should be the one who directed this film?
Yeah, good questions. Well, I was attracted to it for a few reasons. Firstly, because I like, I'd heard of the SpectraVision folks, and I wanted to work with them, and I met them and I liked them, and I felt like we had some common interests. And secondly, I liked that I was an outsider. I liked that I was not, I'm not known as a thriller horror director. I'm not a serial killer fan or someone that follows that world very closely. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting, actually. Like, you take someone like me, this sort of more indie, quirky, feminist, ballsy woman director, and what's her opinion of this serial killer trope? Because there've been so many, particularly movies about Bundy. And so I liked that I was sort of an outsider, and that I had what I thought was a fresh perspective on it, or at least a different perspective on it. And then I just forgot your second question. What was the second question?
Well,
It's very short-term memory.
Me too. I know. I think you answered the first question for the second question first.
Oh, did I? See,
Yeah,
there you go.
right.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, well, okay. You felt okay. So they were kind of combination anyhow.
Oh, You asked about a woman director that I thought, why did I think, yes. So I sort of blended them. But yes,
you did.
I did think it was important. I just thought, in today's sort of social political landscape, you could not have a movie about two men sitting in a room talking about raping and murdering women and not have there be a very strong female perspective from this. So I just thought, it's just not going to fly to make this movie with a male director. That was my personal opinion. And I said that when I went in on my pitch interview. And luckily, the Spectre Vision folks were like, oh no, we totally agree. And so, we were already on the same page for that. And we basically had almost all female heads of department on this film. We had a female DP, female producers as well. We had two male producers as well, but two female producers. We had, female costumes. We had the production designer was a man, but he's gay. So, I thought we could get a little pass. And also a very old friend of mine, Michael Fitzgerald, just name check him. He's wonderful. And Karina Silva, the DP, also wonderful. And so we all just kind of worked together collectively to sort of say, like, in this script, we don't see the victims, we don't hear from the victims, but how can we make them very present? How can we say, we cannot, we can't just have this movie be just about curiosity about Bundy, because that's been done before. And to me, it's also just not very interesting if that's the only piece, right? So I wanted there to be these other layers. I wanted there to be the layer of how does this affect Bill? And I wanted there to be the layer of, and how does this kind of affect the women sitting in the audience? Like, every woman I know knows what it's like to walk down a dark street and hear footsteps behind you and get scared, right? We all have experienced that. And so it's just a different situation for women living in the world. Like, we have to be more careful. We have to be more aware. We are often more scared. We're often more physically vulnerable. And so that's something that, we've all experienced. And I just felt like, how can we sort of, esoterically is not the right word, but how can we just sort of bring like the fiber of that to this movie in some way? Because that's such an important part of this story. Like, people like Ted Bundy are part of why people like me get scared walking down a dark street alone, And so I just was like, those two things, even though that's the second part, the female part is not in this story, I thought I gotta weave it in somehow. So, and I just felt like men, it's not that a man couldn't do that. I'm sure some could, but I just felt like they don't know that feeling intimately as much as women do. And of course, I'm completely generalizing here in many ways. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt. But
No, I agree with you, because we as women do feel more vulnerable, in those kinds of. It's funny. After I watched your movie and I went out for my morning walk, I started thinking about it.
Oh no! Great, I made you more scared. Great.
And it's daylight and I've walked this for a long time. And I'm like, maybe I should become even more aware. Yeah. And I used to live in New York City, and I had somebody follow me once, and that was interesting. We won't even get into that. But anyhow, so I understand.
But I mean, everyone has those stories,
yes.
Everyone has those stories. And I just thought, we can't make this movie and not do and have a nod to that, because the women in the audience are going to sit there thinking about that, and anyone who was alive when Ted Bundy was, out there, remembers, or not even just Ted Bundy, any of the other serial killers, like, we all remember that time of like, oh, close your windows, lock your doors, that happens at certain periods of our lives always. So, so that, I just hope that people think about that, I hope that obviously we're going to get interest in people who are just like, they're curious about Ted Bundy and they're curious about Luke's portrayal of Bundy, which is phenomenal. So those people are going to watch. And then there's people that are curious about Bill and his work and profiling, and maybe Mindhunter fans and things like that. And those people are going to watch. But I really wanted to bring a new audience to it. I wanted the film to still be artistic, and I wanted it to feel accessible to people like me. Because now this is a Bundy film that I would watch, whereas normally Bundy films wouldn't really be on my radar. But this one, if I were not the director, would still be on my radar. Oh, here comes one of my children. For a minute, I thought we were going to get interrupted. We'll see.
Right. Yeah, live. It's live. We're live.
Pandemic, folks. We're in those weird few weeks, but when camp ends and school hasn't started, it's like,
yes,
where there's no childcare, and it's like,
you're in that period of time. Yes, for sure. So let's talk about the casting. How did you, I know Elijah Wood was one of the producers. So how did he become involved in this project? And then we'll talk a little bit about Luke Kirby after we talk about Elijah.
Well, Elijah, he should probably say this for himself, but just paraphrasing what I've heard him speak about, they had the script for a number of years and were trying to get it made. And I think originally he was not interested. Like I think he's very good at taking off one hat and putting on another. When he's a producer, and when he's an actor, he's an actor. And he knows when he's wearing what hat and when to take the other one off. And so he was approaching it very much producerially. Is that a word?
It is now.
Yeah, coined it. And he just knew that it was, would make an interesting dynamic movie. And then I think as the process got going, he just started thinking like, hey, I connect to Bill. I have something to say, from Bill's perspective. And so when I came on, he was already attached as Bill, which I was thrilled about. I was like, great. I love Elijah. I've always been a fan of his. And so I was thrilled. And I think Elijah has a particular empathy that he shows on screen. Like something about his eyes, and he's just genuinely a good person. I mean, I love telling this story, but when we were filming, it was very stressful, right? It was the first time any of us had been out of our homes. It was, just a few months after the pandemic had started. And there were earthquakes and crazy fires, like we couldn't breathe the air. It was really intense. Everybody had a moment of like losing their temper for a second, and just except for Elijah. Elijah was like cool as a cucumber, kind to everyone, always like so sweet. So he just has a really good core. And so does Bill, the real Bill Hagmaier. He's just a genuinely good person. They're very different as actual people, but there's a goodness to them that I think overlaps really nicely. And so, so I was thrilled that Elijah was on. And then Luke was somebody who I kind of had to pursue. I got the idea of Luke, you start thinking about roles, right? And he came to my mind. And as I said, I've always been a fan of his. And then I started looking at pictures of him and pictures of Bundy, and I started lining them up. And I was like, they look a lot alike, Luke hates hearing that. But I just thought, God, like this, he would be perfect because he has that sort of lanky 80s manness. Like nowadays they think of very male as much more bulky muscles, and and Luke is more of a sort of 70s 80s looking guy to me. And so we offered him the part through his reps, and he turned it down. He's like, I don't want to play Bundy. I don't think there should be more Bundy movies. And I contacted him through, he's friends with friends of mine. And so I contacted him personally, and I said, hey, listen, I totally respect you not wanting to play the part, can we just meet and talk? And he happened to be coming to LA. And so we met in a park. It was actually the very beginning of the pandemic. And we stayed 6 feet away, and we walked in a park, and we ended up talking for hours and really shared a lot in common about like, hey, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right. And we have to do it with some sort of edge of something, it's not just for the gore, right? Which this movie doesn't have any of that. This is really much more of an intellectual pursuit, more of an artistic pursuit. And as I mentioned earlier, it's saying something different about the women in the room and the victims. And so he, just because I think we shared artistic sensibility, he came on and we had a great time. And I love them both. I mean, they both become friends, and they're just the sweetest. They're so talented and so lovely. And it was a really, as odd as it is, we were making a movie about a killer. It was a very life-affirming experience, because both just for the love of the craft and the love of each other, but also, because of the love of getting to work again after having gone through a few, our industry shut down for about 5 or 6 months, almost completely, So, yeah. And then Alexa Palladino, she's also somebody who I've been a fan of for a really long time. And I'd seen her, she's been in friends of mine, their movies, and I just always thought she was great. And she walked in, and again, she just had this like 80s vibe to her that things being authentic to the time period is very important to me. And she just was great. And I knew I wanted to work with her. I knew she liked to be kind of quirky, creative in the way that I like to. And so she came on. And then Robert Patrick, who doesn't love Robert Patrick? He was so much fun to have on set. I was always throwing, different things at him, and he was really like, he's a real fun, just energetic guy to have on set. And he loved doing everything. So yeah. And then Gilbert was great as well. I'd never met Gilbert, but I'd seen him in a couple of things. He was wonderful. And, we had really great casting directors. Amber Horn and Danielle, I'm blanking on how to say her name. I'm gonna let me see if I can. Ofiero. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm terrible at that. But Danielle and Amber are really amazing casting directors, and they were so patient with me. I said, I just, I need to comb through everybody and either meet everybody and watch everybody's reel. And they just kept bringing up great people. So.
Well, it's a great cast. And did you do table reads with Elijah and Luke prior to see what their chemistry would be like on screen, or did that just magically happen?
No, we rehearsed. We rehearsed over Zoom like this. Yeah, we did some rehearsals, and we really broke up the scenes, and like, well, at this moment, what does he really want here? What does he want here? What's he really saying there? Because they're often masking, their subtext. And so, yeah, it was interesting. We rehearsed like this I was in this room. We'd do stretches. I'd say, okay, let's raise our arms and stretch. And they'd be in their rooms. But we made it work.
You did make it work. Was Bill Hagmaier a consultant on this?
Yeah, he's an EP or a producer. I can't remember what his credit is, but yeah, he's on as a producer, and he was wonderful and so accessible. He also became a friend. I had so many conversations with him about everything and anything, and he sent me, I have some pictures of like actual photos of Bundy that he sent me, and of him, and he was such a great resource. I would ask him, like, what color were your shoes? Can you send me pictures of your teeth?
Wow.
And all that. He was great. Yeah, I wanted it all to be as authentic as possible, Yeah, and we spoke with the real Paul Decker as well, who Gilbert plays, who became the warden at the prison for many years, and he retired not long ago. But we talked to him about, there were things like, I would say, I see that Bundy's wearing a necklace in this photo. Was he allowed necklaces and shoelaces and belts in prison? And I wanted to make sure that was authentic. And they were like, yeah, he was allowed belts, shoelaces, necklace, like he was allowed all of that. All prisoners were, unless they proved that they could not, if they did something, tried to do something with the belt or the shoelace, then they would get taken away. But otherwise, they were allowed a lot of freedoms that people today are not allowed.
Interesting, because you would think maybe he would commit suicide, because those are the things you certainly used for that, but I guess they weren't afraid of that.
Bundy would have never committed suicide. He loved himself too much. He wanted to live. And he kind of enjoyed his fame and popularity. So I don't think he would have wanted to miss a minute of that.
Probably not. His ego was so huge, and he probably thought he could get away with all the things that he got away with, for sure.
Yeah.
So we only have a minute or two left, but you said you started filming this after the pandemic. What was the most difficult part of shooting this, and when did you start to shoot it? And where? Was it LA? Were you in LA?
We filmed in Los Angeles, and let me think. So we were actually in prep we were about 4 or 5 weeks away from shooting. And then the pandemic happened and we had to shut down. And then we had a few months where we were like, what is going on? And then I don't know if you remember, but the governor and all the unions came out with their rules and regulations for what we could do. And so then once all that was going, we were like, okay, we can do this now in a safe way. And we had a wonderful specialist, air quality specialist, who came in and really taught us a lot. I know early on in the pandemic, people weren't as aware of how much it was airborne. And what we did was we recirculated the air in the room every 15 minutes. So we would make sure every single location had both an ingress and an egress for the air. And we would every 15 minutes stop and blow all the air in the room out and recirculate it with fresh air. And we had no positive cases. So I really think that us doing that was a big help. I think the hardest thing about production was the pandemic. I did not want anyone to die on my watch. I was not.
Right.
We had older actors and older crew members, and who knows what other health issues people have privately. And I just, it was really important to me to keep everyone alive. And so that was the hardest thing, honestly, was that we hadn't. Now I think it's more regular. People have filmed in the pandemic a lot now, but that was the first time for any of us at that moment. So that was the hard.
Very difficult. Where can people see No Man of God?
It's coming out August 27th, and they can see it in theaters. It's coming out in theaters. If you're, in an area where it's safe to go to the movie theater, please do. It's so fun to see it on the big screen.
Yes.
And then they can also see it, you'll purchase it on iTunes and all those other platforms where you can buy movies. And it's exciting. It comes out really soon.
Well, Amber, I wish you much success with this film. It really is beautifully done, beautifully photographed, great acting. I really highly recommend this movie. So everybody seek out No Man of God. And thank you for coming back on the show. I look forward to having you back on with your next project.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to see you again, and have
You
fun on
too.
your walks. Don't
Thank
worry
you.
about behind you.
Thank you. If
All
you've
right.
missed any of the Jan Price shows all about movies, they are all archived on thejanpriceshow.com. You can also find us on the iHeart Podcast Network, Apple, Google, iTunes, anywhere you get YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Jan Price Show. Thank you all for listening.